It's not that anything about people certification thing.
Mhm.
Well, the lady, she didn't really like ask me a question. Like,
What did you ask
I
her?
don't know. I'm gonna show you. Like, I don't know if I didn't ask, right? But I asked her about it because I wanted.
Okay. Good afternoon to everyone. We can go ahead and begin. Really, there isn't much in course logistics. By next week, you'll have a full schedule that kind of shows everything week by week, alongside the chapters we'll cover and the assignments and the exam dates. So the exam dates are going to be on there as well, and I'm hoping that the exam dates are going to be set, they're firm, and there's going to be like they're going to be broken out in a way where it's like there's time there's a good time from the first exam to the second one. So it looks like we're going to have our first exam kind of before spring break. We'll come back from spring break, we take another exam, and then we have our final. Okay, so the schedule is going to have everything like dates wise, assignment due dates as well, and everything should be in there included. So that will be published sometime next week. And in terms of modules and where we at, obviously we're in week 3, and we have talked about encryption in chapter 2. So we should have an idea of what encryption solves or what encryption is. We talked about the types of encryption, whether it's symmetric or asymmetric, which is public encryption. We talked about digital signatures, digital envelopes, which helps to deliver kind of the symmetric key for the first given round of symmetric encryption. We also talked about hashing, message authentication codes, which is the MACs, and what they hope to achieve. So you should have an idea, because those are kind of like foundations that we will use and build upon. So our chapter today is going to be about access control, and it really relates to authentication. Okay, so we want to obviously authenticate the given users to allow them to be to have access to the specific system and specific resources, and we can also want to control what they do on the given systems. Okay, so does anyone have any concerns, questions, anything? Yes.
Where's the exams?
That is to be decided. So when I post the schedule, you'll have kind of a timeline when the exams will do. And I think before the exam, like by 2-3 weeks, we'll decide if it's. How many of you guys would like the exam to be online? Okay. And how many in person? None. Um, okay, so I will take that into consideration for the exams. Okay, so maybe we'll have like the day of the exam. This is not don't take my word for it, but it'll be something like where we have the exam on a given day of the lecture. There will be no lecture. The exam will be due, and I'll be either due that same day or maybe give you an extra day for it. Okay, so that is to be decided. But in terms of due dates wise, assignments and exams, I want everyone to know when the exams fall on exactly. So if you have a trip, something that goes on, so you can let me know ahead so we can accommodate and make sure you're on track. So I made a resource for this research paper that is going to be useful when we talk about our chapter today. So if you want to check it out, if you like to read papers, that is optional. Okay, so access control and user authentication. Usually the first part of this chapter is going to be about user authentication, and we will get into access control along the chapter. Okay, so the RFC 4949 is the process, basically, or you could say the way of verifying an identity claimed by or for a system entity. right? And the way we can verify the users, there's obviously many types, and I think the simple one is that we have a user ID and a given password. So authentication process, obviously, it is kind of the first line of defense. We know, and we said usually kind of defenses is a multi-layer defense. So building a block of line of defense by having some sort of authentication, right? And it's kind of the basis, or you can say the basic for access control and user accountability that we have. And also, so we have two phases that come with identification, or you could say authentication. And the first one is identifying. So we are presenting an identifier to the system, and that could be an RFID, security card, it could be a token. If you go to the ATM, your identification step is your given token that you can kind of give to the system so that it can try to process it. The verification is kind of like where we kind of try to verify the given information to try to present or generate authentication information that will kind of correlate and have a binding between the entity and the identifier. So those are typically the two given steps that we have to deal with authentication. So we typically have an authentication model, and this model kind of represents these two given steps. And a lot of enterprises, you can say websites, applications, tend to follow this authentication model, which is made by the NIST and that given unique number. So that model is to secure digital authentication, and the model describes how users would register, how they would get credentials, how they're authenticated and granted access. So it's kind of a way like when we talk about networking, we have an OCI model that showcases everything for us. Authentication kind of makes that authentication model that we have kind of breaks everything into clear stages and roles. Okay, so it usually always starts with the given applicant, and the applicant is going to have obviously will try to kind of be in contact with the given system such that they can get given credentials, and that credentials are going to be uniquely attached to that given user. And then that user will try to validate the given information. And that leads to the third step that we have is obviously verification. So the user will be, the initial stage is that he is an applicant, then he will become a subscriber or part of that given organization that we have. So with authentication, who is involved? There's kind of like three players, you can say, or three parties that are involved. We have the subscriber, and that is the given user or claimant, you could say. And the service they want to access, that could be any, like you want to log into your Amazon account, to your ATM to do a deposit or cash out. Trusted identity system is the verifier or credential provider. So it's not just the user and the website that we have here. There are trusted systems that are in between. So the first step is that obviously we have the given applicant, and obviously they will start as an applicant, and the applicant will register with the RA, the credential service provider, and the RA is going to verify some things from you. So for example, you go to a bank, the bank is the given RA for you, and the RA is going to obviously you're going to have a session or a meeting with them. They're going to verify your actual given information, real information, like your ID, address. And that process happens before occurring, right? So that is the first given step. Then obviously you become a subscriber or a claimant here. So first there's identity proofing and user registration. Okay. Then when you become a subscriber, you're going to be provided with given credentials or tokens. So that is the registration step. And after that, you can become kind of a subscriber. So credential is going to be a digital record of an identity. So this is any given credentials. It can be a password, user ID and a password, like we said, an actual given a token, could be an object as well, or it could be a smart cards. So the tokens are obviously, or you could say the credentials are going to be inbound uniquely to the given users, and they are going to be used to kind of verify the user verify the user once they log into the given system. So then obviously the subscriber from that given phase would try to kind of him becoming a claimant during the login would try to kind of present that given token to authenticate themselves, and real identity is no longer checked because he has passed on that first given phase. Okay, so now we talk about, this is basically the first step we said with authentication. It's basically identification, and under identification, they are provided given roles, and you could say token. This is the other one, is where we have to kind of verify or authenticate the given user so that once you become a subscriber, there's obviously an authenticated protocol exchange that is going on between you and the verifier. You are providing your given token credentials, and then you have been authenticated, obviously, here with the RP, and then you will be an authenticated session. So you'll have an authenticated session, kind of like maybe your bank, to actually log into your mobile bank app. Okay. So the verifier does not really grant access. The verifier just like to kind of check, and we're going to talk about how passwords are going to be stored. So once you log into your mobile banking app and you put your user ID and you put your password, how the verifying happens. Okay, so the assertion is sent to the relying party, the RP, and then the RP is going to trust the result, and the RP decides whether to grant that given access. Authenticated session, then you're going to have a specific session, and this allows you to continue access, and the user is going to remain authenticated for that period of time. Usually that period of time is decided by the given entity, you could say, or the given that given app or that given service. So session ends on logout or expiration. So typically when we talk about a little bit of security attacks, when it comes to kind of authentication or access control, that session time has a play, and it's going to be very crucial. So there's 4 means of authenticating. You could say authenticating and identifying. So the first thing that we have is something that the individual knows. That could be a password, or a PIN, or answers to prearranged questions, where you have to kind of like make these personal questions, like what's your favorite pet, or what was the first car model that you had, something like that. Something the individual poses a token, so it could be a smart card, electric card, physical key, and then something the individual is static biometric, fingerprint, retina, or face. You could say Face ID. And I think we're going to talk about Face ID in the upcoming lecture. And usually what the Face ID does is that basically they're going to take the intrinsic features of your given face on a given pattern. And once you try to log in, it would try to find any kind of similarity of your given features to what is being stored. Okay, and then something the individual does is going to be dynamic in terms of static. So dynamic could be voice. Does anyone have kind of like some sort of authentication via voice? Has anyone encountered something with that? I think we have not, so not sure where it's practically being used, but that does exist. So the assurance level is basically the degree, or the given degree of certainty, a certainty that a user has presented to a credential that refers to his or her. So how, like, it's kind of like a level that based on a higher scale, we can confirm the given credentials belong to that given user. So assurance level could be like when you log into your UCF, the assurance level is a level on a scale that the user ID that you're putting, or the NID with your password, is given associated being to that student. Okay, so more specifically is defined as to kind of like the vetting process to establish the given identity or the credentials that was issued, and the given confidence that we have is that the individual who is using those credentials actually belongs to them. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about the level of assurances. Obviously, it goes from level 1 to 4, 1 being little confidence of the given credentials for that given user, and level 4 is going to be very high confidence in the given identity. Now, potential impact kind of deals with assurance, is that, and the FIPS kind of made like kind of 3 levels of potential impact for organizations or individuals that should be there, should be a breach of given security. And those are kind of like low, moderate, and high. And a high one would be that given error could be expected to have maybe a catastrophic, you could say adverse effect, or it could have like a domino effect such that it would affect other systems in the organization, devices, and much more. And then obviously low is like an error that can be expected to have like some sort of effect, but there's not really big and major. So usually the potential impact comes with risks. In these given organizations, when they have data breaches or security attacks, they would kind of see the potential impact, and the way they react is based on these kind of tiers that we have, like low, moderate, or high. So assurance level becomes here, that assurance level becomes a required assurance level. And with the potential impact, it comes a potential impact because of the authentication failure that we have, and the areas of risk become source of authentication risk. So together, these determine how strong the authentication must be for us, not just like in the beginning phase of designing these given systems, but throughout the system functionality. So these are kind of like some examples, understanding some like impact and assurance level. And here we have some categories for authentication errors. And maybe here we have like one impact that is harm to organization programs or interest. Based on the given assurance level that we have, we assign kind of like a low, mod, or high to it. So this given table will show like a maximum potential impact if authentication fails. So as assurance level increases that we have here with 1, 2, 4, the acceptable risk kind of decreases. So higher assurance level are required when failures cause greater harm for us. Now we talk about password authentication, and obviously we know that it's kind of it's being used everywhere. And I think everyone has encountered obviously user IDs and passwords, and user provides names and logins and password. That's the identification step. And then the system compares that password with that stored for that specific login. So usually passwords are not going to be stored in plain text, because we know that the given data, when it is being stored, has to be stored in a way that is a kind of encrypted, right? Such that if the attacker has that plain text password or the ciphertext password, they will not be able to crack it. So the user ID is going to determine the authorized to access that system and determine the user privileges. So it is used kind of in access control. And that is kind of like also with kind of authentication, or you can say these given credentials, we can have a way to control these given users, so they have a way, or kind of have some tiers or privileges on what they can do. Difference from like a data entry position to a database manager, or you could say a higher level in a database given organization. Something like where the level entry can only maybe insert data. They cannot really modify the records, and a manager would do much more. So we come to the idea of password cracking. I think in the next lecture, we will do some hands-on with password cracking. Has anyone used John the Ripper? Okay, 2, good. What about the Windows one, Anne and Abel, I think? No one? Okay. Oh, you have used it? Okay. Okay, good. So obviously password cracking is, and we will have that lab and demo, and this is why we, in the given lecture or the video we have to install Kali is going to be important, because not only Kali is going to be used for your future assignments with that given hypervisor, any hypervisor that you want, which is UTM or VirtualBox or VMware, but John the Ripper is a tool that is included in giving Kali Linux. So when we do John the Ripper for password cracking, we are going to use Kali Linux, okay? So basically, password cracking is a set of techniques that is used to recover passwords from computer systems, and the attackers would use these techniques to gain unauthorized access. We'll talk about the way, or you could say these techniques, to the vulnerable systems, okay? And most of these techniques are going to be successful due to the lack of diversity in character, and you can say the given sets or the given list of passwords that we have. So popular methods is dictionary attack, which is basically kind of like having an actual dictionary of given password, and you're going to try every given password in that list. We have rainbow table attack that is kind of similar in a way, but not exact. And then we have tools like John the Ripper, Hydra, and Crunch, and much more. So we'll try to get one kind of a good demonstration with password cracking using John the Ripper. So modern approaches nowadays, obviously, because we know there's attacks, password cracking techniques that can be done, and we're going to talk about them in a minute, is that we make complex password policy, and that password complex policy is forcing basically the users to choose kind of like stronger passwords or complex passwords. Number of characters has to be like higher than 8. You would have to have like a given character, like a $sign or something. You have to maybe use numbers and much more. And obviously we have multi-factor authentication. So, however, password cracking techniques has also improved. So the processing capacity available for password cracking has increased dramatically with the time, or you can say technology improvement, and the use of sophisticated, or you can say infeasible algorithms to generate potential passwords. So studying examples and structures of actual passwords in the use. So it's kind of like a given game. We have to kind of make password policies or the defense system of passwords kind of strong, and the password cracking attacks is also becoming strong. So this is kind of the paper we have attached on here, and this paper is about a research that was done on a university where these given kind of, and you can read this, obviously we have a slide about it, but here it's in detail. So this is University of, Carnegie Mellon and University of Mexico. So that paper is basically about kind of like how long it would take to crack certain passwords with time. So the researchers analyzed passwords from over 25,000 students at a research university, and that given university before that research enforced a complex password policy, and then passwords were evaluated using modern password cracking approach. So these modern password approaches can also be used by the enterprises to defend or kind of update their given systems from time to time, right? And the attack strategy was leaked, were based on real leaked password datasets. So you might ask, have anyone heard of RockQ passwords file? You guys have, the ones that use John the Ripper. Yeah. So basically, leaked password datasets comes from anywhere. If you research about real leaked dataset passwords, there can be a lot from actual data breaches, ones that can be used for resources. And basically, it's just like datasets that would contain widely known passwords or widely known leaks. Okay. So this study reflects real user behavior, not theoretical password strength. So here we have kind of like the percentage that was guessed and the number of guesses that were made for these passwords. And the observation of this given kind of graph is that even with a small number of guesses, those guesses crack passwords, a few passwords. And as more guesses are made, like brute force attacks, the success rates rise very non-linearly. So around about 10 to the power of 9 or 10, the curve begins to rise sharply. So even like with enough guesses, a large fraction of these passwords can be cracked. And that was the result of that paper. So these are the password vulnerabilities, and kind of like one is kind of leads, or you can say open doors to others, is that we have offline dictionary attack, and a specific account attack is where we attack a specific high profile account. We try popular password attacks. We try password guessing. There's also workstation hijacking, exploiting user mistakes, exploiting multiple password uses, and obviously electronic money, and that relates to kind of like passive attacks. So the types of attacks, we have brute force attacks, and we're going to try every possible combination until that password is found. And 81% of these data breaches, you could say, involving are weak or stolen passwords. And this is from Verizon. So similar to kind of like trial and error. We have dictionary attacks where users would try a list of passwords that would like similarly to RockQ files, or kind of like passwords given from data sets or to be found publicly, and targets easy to guess passwords. So the risk effective if a multi-factor authentication is used. What is one way we can do, or from a defense system, is to kind of reduce or avoid these given attacks? Does anyone have anything in mind? Yes.
Well, to prevent the brute force, what you could do is after a certain 3 attempts, you can temporarily lock them out and gradually kind of larger. And then for dictionary, you just have to have passwords not so much be a word, but a phrase.
That's also, yeah, that is correct. And in fact, one thing that you said is like after amount of tries, the kind of the user will be invalidated from entering more passwords. One idea we can do is we can slow down the given request. So it would kind of like have the attacker kind of like, you could say, kind of go insane, meaning like when entering a specific password, it takes kind of time for the password to be authenticated and given back to the user. So specific attack is that the attacker targets one specific user account, and that is common when attacking high-value users in a given organizations. And those password guesses are focused on that personal account or known information from a given user. So it's easier to detect than offline attacks, and account lockout policies help reduce those risks. Password guessing against a single user. So the attack would try to repeat or attempt by maybe dictionary attacks or brute force attacks. And this is often simple or common, and it is going to be limited by login restrictions. So the weak password, the weaker the passwords are, increase the success probability that we have. So monitoring and rate limiting are the key differences here. Popular password attacks is where like an attacker would try a very common list, you could say, and same passwords are tested across many given accounts. So they would just use maybe the highest or top 10 common passwords, and they would try them across many accounts. And they often lead to successful against large systems. So enforcing a strong policy will reduce the risks that we have. And workstation hijacking is that typically, I think a lot of HR workers would leave passwords like on a sticky note or somewhere that the password can be seen. So no password guessing is going to be required. It's kind of based on like the given behavior rather than cryptography or crypto analytic patterns or behaviors here. And that is commonly shared in public environments. So automatic screen locking is going to be an important defense, like when you leave your workstation. So here we have kind of exploring these kind of where the user itself would accidentally expose the passwords, and examples include like phishing emails or fake login page that we get to kind of we sent out these users, and this attack relies on social engineering attacks or phishing attacks. So technical controls are not sufficient. So to deal with that, we have kind of user education to kind of prevent that from happening. And exploring multiple passwords in use, where users use the same password across systems, such as an attacker. Once they have a successful kind of phase for one given site, they would try it on different sites. So to avoid this, we have password managers and multi-factor authentication. Okay, now we talk about passwords, right? So we know that password attacks could happen. And obviously this is the last type of attack, is electronic monitoring, is that the attacker would capture the credentials during network transmission. So they can have a key logging or a network sniffing passively. So often targets have the encrypted connections, and it's difficult for users to kind of actually detect, because we know passive attacks don't affect the actual systems. So we have secure, obviously encryption and secure communication channels reduce the exposure of that. So this is a risk, obviously, when you're using public Wi-Fi, right? But doesn't have any type of security that is being to cover the transmission, the transmission channels that we have. So obviously the victim will enter a password hash, but since the secure channel is not really secure, it would make kind of have an exposure. So the basic idea behind, you could say, secure kind of hashing is that, or password handling is that instead of storing the passwords, they're stored in hash values, right? So we have a given password here, and this is BCRYPT, and this is kind of a hash function. We're going to talk about MDA, SHAs, and this one now it's kind of a hash function that is widely used in common and modern now. So these passwords are going to be stored into hashes, a unique given length of a hash password by using a hash function. And we want to make sure that the hashing is one way and irreversible. So you cannot recompute the hash to find the original plain text or the original passwords. So during the login, the system compares hashes, not passwords. Okay, so we know that from a system perspective, when you have credentials that are assigned, it's going to be basically stored in a database for that given application or server. When you enter passwords, it's comparing the hashes. If the hashes are exactly the same, then you will be successful. Now I have a question, right? So let's say we have kind of two students in here, right? And they both go to Amazon, and they both make accounts, and they both have a different user ID, but the same password. How does the system allow that to happen? Anyone has an idea in mind? Anyone heard of SALT? No? Okay, so this is what we're going to talk about next, is how to achieve something like this, right? Is where users, obviously, like if we're using password 1, and everyone is using password 1, and then the system, as long as the system allows you that identification or that credential given phase allows you to, then you will have that password assigned. Okay, so we want to know why SALT is used, and basically with hashes, and basically SALT is kind of like just adding some sort of unique kind of given characters to the password. And those are obviously not going to be the same per given password. So it makes identical password produce different hashes for us. Okay, so here we're using a hash function of SHA-1, which is very outdated now and not being used. And the slow hash function limits also the guessing speed. So when an attacker tries to do multiple guesses, they would be kind of limited to basically on limited by speed. So SALT helps from you could say developer perspective or actual users to kind of have a unique code with the hash, and then from attacking perspective, it would slow the limit or guessing speed. So offline attacks become more expensive and time consuming. So these techniques reduce the impact of password file compromise. Okay. So here we have a password. Obviously, this is kind of one of the top common password is this given password QWERTY, and that is found on the top common list of passwords. So this is the idea that we have here. We have a client and we have a database here, and the database is going to store the user credentials. So the user would type in a password, like maybe, for example, hello. We would add a SALT, and then we would have a password and SALT here, obviously. So we have the plain text and a given SALT. We pass it into a hash function like MD5, or you can say SHA, and that would be able to give us like that SALT, that plain text encrypted with the SALT value and a hash function. And then we store that in the database. Does that make sense? Anyone has questions? So loading a new passwords, this is what happens. The user would choose a password here, and then the system generates a random SALT. Basically, a random SALT, meaning just like maybe a 12-digit character, is basically unique, similarly kind of to a hash function. So these are going to be combined, and they're loaded here on an index. You'll have a user ID, and you have your hash code. Okay, so the system stores the following: the user ID, the SALT, and the hash password. And the original password is never stored. Once it becomes to loading, here the user enters the ID and a password, and the system That is the wrong figure here, but basically here the opposite is being happening. Obviously, the user will enter an ID and password, and then we will go and kind of like do a keyword or a key label matching with this user ID and salt and the hash code, and to make sure that it is kind of identical or the same, and access will be granted if the two hashes match. So I just want to demonstrate this very quick, and it's nothing major, but if you type in password hash generator here, and there's are some good ones that kind of do much more. We have this one from Bicrypt. This is good, but we just want to use a simple one here. Actually, let's use the Bicrypt one here. Yeah, so if we put any given password, and hopefully you are not choosing one of the common passwords, but here for demonstration that we have, we're going to generate a hash. And here's the given hash. Obviously, you'll have a salt value that is added here. And there's obviously, this is using this specific hash function. So this one itself. Other websites would have kind of like different hash functions that we could use. Yeah, this one, for example, would allow you to choose what you want to do for the algorithm that we have. So you see, even here, it classifies that MD5 and SHA-1 is no longer secure, right? And we have kind of the common and secure is SHA-3, and obviously SHA with 512 or 256. And this one is really good as well. So we kind of have obviously plain text, and that would be, do we have ones for salt? Let's see, salt password generations. You can even give the base here like decimal 16. Where is the option to enter? Let's see, I think we used another one here. Yeah, this one's good. So obviously you have the password length, and this is kind of like the complex password policy that is set. And we have a password that we enter here. And this is going to generate that salt kind of given value with the hash. So hopefully that you have an idea of how passwords are being stored, how passwords turn from plain text to hashes and with the salt value. So this in this given figure, this kind of like you can say scheme, or you can say kind of a given model that has been done by Unix, and there are the founders of that. And we know that Unix is kind of like an operating system. I think that has been published around the 70, and Linux is kind of like a motivation, has been motivated by Unix, right? And the password that they had was limited to 8 characters. It used DES hashing, and we know DES is no longer secure, and did include the small salt that we talked about. And the hashing is repeated multiple times. But with the DES, with the key size that we have is very small, we know that it was kind of like decrypted. Okay, so short passwords are easy to guess. DES is outdated. Small salts limit kind of protection. Fast hashing enables offline attacks. So the current attacks or the current status, you could say, sometimes it's kept for like legacy compatibility, but it's replaced by strong hashing methods that we discussed. So improved implementation, obviously what we have is much stronger hash/salt schemes available for Unix. And then they did try to improve it, obviously here. They recommended hash function based on MD5. And basically all these given like that we talk here about from like a historical timeline from when it was launched to what it is now could be no longer in use, or could be like not being valuable to protect or encrypt the information that we have. So they increased the salt up to 48 bits. Password length is now unlimited. Produced a 128-bit hash, and it kind of used an inner loop with 1,000 iterations to achieve slowdown, right, for the attackers. And this is also not you could say valid or not being used now. So we have PCYRPT. This is the most kind of secure cipher-based hash algorithm. And it is obviously using salt scheme as well. And it uses like a 128-bit salt to create, and that was advanced on from the 48 and 192 for the bit hash value. Okay. So password file access control is what we can try to do is we can block offline guessing attacks by denying access to encrypted passwords, because the vulnerabilities that we have is that there's a weekend in the operating system that allows access to the file, accident with permission, making it readable, users with passwords on our systems, access from backup media, or they sniff passwords and network traffic, as we know. These are the vulnerabilities that kind of have been assigned with passwords, or you can say access control. So what we can do is that we can make available only to privileged users. And I think there's a cool way to kind of not just have access control with credentials, but we can do that with files as well. Okay, shadow password file is also to be used to kind of deny access to these encrypted passwords. So here's the selection strategies that we have, and basically we have user education, and that is one way. Users can be told the importance of using hard to guess passwords and can be provided with guidelines for selecting stronger passwords. And I think here as like how many of you guys work somewhere outside, like maybe as network admins or help desk positions, anything like that? You get sometimes like user awareness training that you have to do from time to time. And that kind of involves something like this. There's obviously one, you could say, pro that has been around, and it is now still being used. When you make an account, there's password generated accounts, or you can say computer generated passwords. The problem with that is that we never choose that option, because these generated passwords are always hard to remember. Okay, so we choose to opt in and enable our own passwords. How many of you guys use your passwords across multiple systems? All of you? Okay, some. The others you guys don't? Like the other students, you don't use the same password for every given system?
I feel like we did, we just, or something like this.
Yeah. How many of you guys kind of use password vaults or these password? Okay, good. Okay, good. To store all your passwords. That is good. What do you use? Yeah, which one?
I use LastPass.
Okay. Zach, what do you use? Same? Okay, good. Yeah, so that is a good way kind of like to have different unique passwords and kind of have like a password kind of loader that can be used. Reactive password checking. So the system would run its own password cracker to find guessable passwords. They do that from time to time. And obviously we talked about complex password policy, something that we would have that users are allowed to select their own passwords, but the system checks and allows it to be kind of granted or rejected. And then a goal is obviously to eliminate against these password attacks that we talked about, or guessable password, while allowing the user to select a password that is memorable. And within these complex password policies that is not being discussed here is that when there's a time kind of like every 3 months you have to update your passwords. So that is one given policy. Another policy is obviously to not use the same password. The system would not allow you to use the same password. So proactive kind of password checking is we have a password cracker and compile a large dictionary of passwords not to use, and we would give those, embed them to the system once the user ID or credentials are being handed to the user. And specific rules that the passwords must adhere to. And then we have a Bloom filter, you could say, where they build a table based on dictionary using hashes. Okay, so one attack that we discussed is Rambo table attack. Is that what they would do is They would take the given passwords from that given data set. They would generate the hashes for them, and those hashes will be used to crack the given passwords. So this is what we have for the first part of passwords. We talked about electronic user authentication principles, that given kind of architectural model for electronic and user verification. We talked about means of authentication, identification also falls under that. Risk assessment, like what we talked about, is that potential or assurance and the risks. And we talked about password-based authentication, the vulnerability of passwords, the use of hash password, and how given plain text passwords turn into a hash function and they're going to be stored. We talked about what password cracking is and kind of the type of attacks against these passwords. And we have password file access control, where we can kind of assign given privileges with these given passwords. And there's some selection strategies that revolve around this. So the next topic is that we know, we spoke about in the beginning of the lecture, is that these credentials that are provided to the user is not just user IDs and passwords. They can be much more. So we also want to talk about those in terms of like different types of credentials, identifications, how secure they are, and kind of talk about in depth really about them. So we'll talk about memory cards, smart cards, electronic identity cards, biometric authentication, where there's physical characteristics are used in those applications, and operation of biometric authentication systems and the accuracy of it as well, and remote user authentication. How many of you guys use AnyDesk or TeamViewer? None? Do any of you guys do kind of like you Telnet or do SSH to your other given devices? Yeah? Okay.
SSH.
It's not secure. No one uses that Telnet. Yeah, it's not secure. So yeah, obviously SSH. But what application do you use? Like
SSH.
yeah, you do command line?
Yeah.
Okay, command line. Okay, good. So obviously, if you're using a GUI application, we talk about remote user authentication, like the protocol, the token protocol, static biometric protocol, dynamic as well, and security issues for user authentication. So this is all what we have for today. So we will take attendance very quick, and I think next week obviously the schedule will be posted next week. We will do a lab with password cracking, so you can know how to kind of do dictionary attacks against passwords. And how many of you use Ubuntu? Does anyone use Ubuntu in here? Okay, good. Okay, sounds good. So this is what we have for today. Let us take attendance very quick. Any questions on Zoom? Does anyone have any questions that were not answered on Zoom? Okay, sounds good. I will go ahead and end the Zoom session.